The morning sun cast long shadows across the red dirt of Mars Colony 7 as Kyung-ho Kim blew his whistle. 20 young soldiers immediately dropped to the ground and began doing push-ups. Their faces showed pain, but their bodies kept moving. This was exactly what Kyung-ho wanted to see. Faster. Your enemy will not wait for you to catch your breath, he shouted, walking between the rows of sweating recruits. At 35 years old, Kyung-ho had spent 15 years training soldiers. His methods were tough, but they worked. Every soldier who completed his program became stronger, faster, and more confident. The training camp sat on a flat plain surrounded by red rocky hills. Mars Colony 7 was one of the smaller human settlements, far from the busy cities of Earth. Here, away from distractions. Kyung-ho had been running this program for 3 years, and word of his success had spread throughout the colonies. "Sir, incoming transmission from command," called out his assistant, a young woman named Hannah who handled communications. She pointed to the small building that served as their headquarters. Kyung-ho nodded and jogged toward the building. Behind him, the soldiers continued their exercises. He had trained them well enough to work without constant supervision. As he entered the cool interior of the building, he wondered what command wanted. Usually they left him alone to do his work. The communication screen flickered to life, showing the face of General Torres from Mars Central Command. The general looked worried, which was unusual. General Torres never looked worried about anything. "We have a problem," the general said without greeting. "Our deep space sensors picked up something big heading toward your sector. We think it might be an alien ship." Kyung-ho felt his heart beat faster. Humans had been exploring space for decades, but contact with alien life was still rare. Most encounters had been peaceful trading missions or brief diplomatic meetings. Nothing that would worry a general. "How big is big, sir?" Kyung-ho asked. "Big enough to carry a small city." And it changed course directly toward your camp about 2 hours ago. "We are sending backup, but they will not reach you for at least 6 hours. The screen went dark. Kyung-ho stood alone in the quiet room, processing what he had just heard. An alien ship the size of a city was coming straight for his training camp. His 20 soldiers were brave, but they were still learning. Never faced real combat, let alone alien technology. He walked outside and blew his whistle 3 times. This was the signal for emergency assembly. The soldiers quickly formed neat rows in front of him, their faces serious. He could sense something important was happening. "Listen carefully," Kyung-ho began. "We have an unknown contact approaching our position. I want all weapons checked and ready. Emergency protocols are now in effect." Soldiers nodded and began moving toward the weapon storage. Kyung-ho watched them with pride, even facing the unknown. They remained calm and followed their training. This was what made humans special. They could adapt to any situation. The sky above Mars was always a pale orange color. But now Kyung-ho could see a dark spot growing larger. The alien ship was already visible, which meant it was enormous. As it came closer, he could make out details. The ship was black with silver markings, shaped like a giant curved blade. It moved silently through the thin Martian atmosphere. "Sir, should we try to contact them?" asked Private Jinwoo, one of his best students. "Not yet. Let us see what they want first," Kyung-ho replied, though he was already reaching for his radio. To contact Mars Command again? The radio crackled with static, then nothing. The alien ship had somehow blocked their communications. Kyung-ho felt a chill run down his spine. Ships that blocked communications usually were not coming to make friends. The massive vessel settled onto the ground about half a mile from the camp. It landed so gently that it barely disturbed the red dust. Kyung-ho had to admit that was impressive piloting. The ship was even bigger than he had thought, easily 3 times the size of the largest human spacecraft he had ever seen. A section of the ship's hull opened like a flower, revealing a ramp that extended to the ground. Figures began walking down the ramp, and Kyung-ho reached for his binoculars. What he saw made his blood run cold. The aliens were huge, at least 8 feet tall, with thick gray skin and 4 arms. They wore armor that looked both advanced and ancient, decorated with symbols that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Each alien carried weapons that hummed with energy. But what worried Kyung-ho most was how they moved. These were not explorers or diplomats. These were soldiers. Form defensive positions, he ordered quietly. His soldiers spread out, using the camp buildings for cover. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they would not give up without a fight. The aliens approached slowly, their weapons ready but not aimed directly at the humans. Their leader, distinguished by more elaborate armor, stopped about 50 feet away. When it spoke, its voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Humans of this settlement, we come by order of the Valdarian Empire. You will surrender your weapons and come with us. Resistance will result in destruction of this facility and all within it. Kyun-ho stepped forward, his rifle held casually, but ready. I am Kyung-ho Kim, commander of this training facility. By what authority do you make these demands? The alien leader tilted its massive head. By the authority of Empress Naravel, ruler of 10,000 worlds, you've been selected for a special purpose. Your reputation as a trainer of warriors has reached even our distant realm. This was not what Kyung-ho had expected. How could aliens know about his work? And why would they travel across space to find him? He felt like he was missing important information. What kind of special purpose? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. That will be explained when you reach the Imperial Palace. You will come willingly, or you will come as a prisoner. Your choice. Kyung-ho looked back at his soldiers. They were young and brave, but they stood no chance against alien technology. If he refused, they would all die. If he agreed, maybe he could find a way to escape later and warn Earth about this Valdarian Empire. I will come with you, he said. But my soldiers stay here unharmed. The alien leader made a sound that might have been laughter. Your soldiers are of no interest to us. Only you, trainer of warriors. Only you. As the aliens escorted him toward their ship, Kyun-ho wondered what he had gotten himself into. Behind him, his soldiers watched in silence, unable to help their instructor. Above them, the pale Martian sky seemed to mock their helplessness. The ship's interior was vast and dimly lit, filled with strange machines and alien crew members. As they lifted off from Mars, Kyung-ho realized he was traveling farther from home than any human had ever gone. Whatever this Empress wanted from him, it was important enough to risk open contact with humanity. He had no idea that his greatest challenge was just beginning. The journey through space took 3 days. Kyung-ho spent most of that time in a small cell that was clean, but clearly designed for prisoners. The walls were made of some kind of metal that felt warm to the touch, and the only furniture was a bed and a small table.
Food appeared through a slot in the wall 3 times a day.
It tasted strange, but kept him fed. On the second day, guards brought another human to the cell across from his. The man was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore the uniform of a diplomatic officer, though it was now wrinkled and dirty. You must be the trainer they picked up from Mars, the man said through the bars. I am Seung-min Park, formerly of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. I have been their guest for about 2 weeks now. Kyung-ho moved closer to the bars. It felt good, too. Hear another human voice. Do you know why they brought us here? Seung-min laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh yes, I know exactly why. They want you to do something that every sane person in the galaxy thinks is impossible. They want you to make their empress lose weight. What do you mean? The Valdarian Empire spans thousands of worlds. Their empress Naravel rules it all, but she has a problem. She weighs about as much as a small building and can barely move. In their culture, being big shows power, but she has gone too far. Now her enemies see her as weak because she cannot even stand up properly. Kyung-ho sat down on his bed, trying to process this information. So they kidnapped a human fitness trainer to help their ruler lose weight? Exactly. They heard about your success with impossible cases on Mars. Word travels fast in the galaxy, even to alien empires. They think human stubbornness might be the only thing that can convince her to change. Before Kyung-ho could ask more questions, the cell door opened. 2 guards entered, gesturing for him to follow. As they walked through the corridors of the ship, Kyung-ho saw other aliens going about their business. They all stared at him with curiosity, as if humans were rare and interesting creatures. The ship landed with barely a tremor. Through a small window, Kyuncho could see a massive city stretching to the horizon. Buildings rose like mountains, connected by bridges that seemed to float in the air. Everything was built on a scale that made human cities look like toys. They transferred him to a smaller vehicle that flew through the city streets. The Valdarian people on the streets stopped to watch them pass. Some pointed and made sounds that might have been excitement or fear. Kyung-ho realized he might be the first human many of them had ever seen. The Imperial Palace was not just big, it was enormous beyond imagination. The main building could have held a dozen human cities inside it. Spires reached toward the sky, like frozen lightning, and gardens spread across terraces that were themselves larger than most human settlements. Guards in elaborate armor stood at every entrance, their weapons gleaming in the alien sunlight. Inside the palace, Kyung-ho was led through halls that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered in artwork that showed the history of the Valdarian Empire. Battles, conquests, and ceremonies filled every surface. In many of the pictures, he noticed the same figure appearing again and again, a massive female alien, growing larger in each successive image. "That is Empress Naravel," explained one of his guards in broken human language. "She has ruled for 40 years. Each year she grows more powerful." Kyung-ho could see the truth in the pictures. She was not growing more powerful. She was growing more helpless. In the earliest images, she stood tall and proud. In the more recent ones, she was sitting or being supported by mechanical devices. They finally reached a set of doors that were so tall they seemed to touch the ceiling. The guards opened them with great ceremony, revealing the throne room beyond. Kyung-ho stepped inside and immediately understood why the doors were so large. The throne room was the size of a football stadium. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above, and the walls were decorated with treasures from across the galaxy. But all of this grandeur was overshadowed by the figure on the throne at the far end of the room. Empress Naravel was indeed massive. She looked like a cross between a lizard and a bear, with thick gray skin and small but intelligent eyes. She wore robes that could have been used as tents, and her throne was more like a small building than a chair. Floating platforms surrounded her, carrying food, drinks, and various assistants. But what struck Kyung-ho most was not her size. It was the look in her eyes. Despite her obvious physical problems, her gaze was sharp and calculating. This was someone who had ruled an empire for decades, and she was still very much in charge. "So," she said, her voice filling the vast room, "you are the human who thinks he can accomplish what no Valdarian has dared to attempt." Kyunjo walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Court officials lined the walls, watching nervously. He could feel their fear and curiosity. When he reached the base of the throne, he looked up at the Empress and spoke clearly. "Your Majesty, I am Kyung-ho Kim. I understand you have a problem that needs solving." The court gasped. No one spoke to the Empress so directly. Several officials moved their hands toward their weapons. But Empress Naravel raised one massive hand, and everyone froze. "A problem?" she asked, her voice dangerous. "I am the ruler of 10,000 worlds. I command fleets that could destroy your entire planet. What problem could I possibly have?" Kyung-ho felt sweat running down his back, but he kept his voice steady. "With respect, Your Majesty, you cannot stand up. You can barely move. Your enemies are calling you weak, and your empire is beginning to crack. If you want to stay in power, you need to get back in shape." The silence that followed was so complete that Kyung-ho could hear his own heartbeat. He expected to be executed on the spot. Instead, something unexpected happened. Empress Naravel began to laugh. It started as a low rumble and grew into something that shook the walls. Her laughter was not angry or mocking. It was genuine amusement. "You have courage, human," she said when she finally stopped laughing. "No one has spoken to me like that. In 20 years, very well. You claim you can solve my problem? Prove it." She gestured to an official who stepped forward nervously, Advisor Thexmar explained the terms. Thexmar was a thin alien with purple skin and too many eyes. He spoke, in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. Human trainer, you will have 1 solar cycle to show measurable improvement in the Empress's physical condition. If you succeed, you will be richly rewarded. If you fail, you will be executed. The court murmured with excitement. This was entertainment they had not expected. Kyung-ho felt his mouth go dry, but he nodded. I accept your terms, but I will need help. What kind of help? The Empress asked. I need a nutritionist who understands both human and Valdarian physiology. I need an engineer who can build specialized equipment. I need complete authority over your exercise and diet program. No exceptions. The Empress studied him for a long moment. You ask for much, human. You want results? Your Majesty? Which is what it takes to get them. Another long pause. Then the Empress nodded slowly. Very well. Thexmar, bring the other. Humans. The trainer will have his team. As guards escorted Kyung-ho from the throne room, he wondered what he had gotten himself into. He had just agreed to train the most powerful being in the galaxy, with his life as the penalty for failure. But as he thought about the challenge ahead, he felt something he had not expected. He felt excited. This was exactly the kind of impossible task that made him want to prove what humans could accomplish. The Empress might be massive, but she was still a living being. Every living being could be trained to be better than they were. The real work was about to begin. The next morning, Kyung-ho met his team in a small room near the palace kitchens. Hyujin Lee was a nutritionist who had been captured from a research station near Jupiter. She was young, maybe 28, with quick eyes and steady hands. Dongwoo Choi was an engineer from the Mars shipyards, a quiet man who spoke little but understood machines better than most people understood themselves. So, Hyujin said, looking around the room, we are supposed to help a giant alien queen. Lose weight, or we all die. Did I understand that correctly? That is exactly right, Kyung-ho replied. The question is, can we do it? Dongwoo pulled out a small tablet he had somehow managed to keep during his capture. I have been thinking about this all night. The Empress weighs approximately 4 tons. Her body structure is similar to Earth bears, but much larger. The engineering challenges alone are enormous. What about nutrition? Kyung-ho asked Hyujin. She shook her head. I spent yesterday observing her eating habits. She consumes about 50,000 calories per day, mostly from processed foods that are designed to taste good rather than provide proper nutrition. Her metabolism is slower than a human's, but not by much. She should not be that heavy. Which means the problem is not just overeating, Kyung-ho said. It is also lack of movement. She has been sitting still for so long that her muscles have weakened and her body has forgotten how to process food efficiently. They spent the morning planning. Their approach, Kyung-ho would handle the physical training, starting with simple movements that the Empress could actually perform. Hyujin would redesign her entire diet, focusing on foods that would boost her metabolism and reduce the constant hunger that came from eating empty calories. Dongwoo would build equipment that could support her massive weight while allowing her to exercise safely. The first training session was scheduled for that afternoon in the Empress's private chambers. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows above. The walls were covered in soft fabrics, and the floor was made of some kind of cushioned material that felt warm underfoot. Empress Naravel sat on a platform that could move around the room, controlled by thought alone. She wore simpler clothing than her formal robes, but even casual clothes on someone her size looked like small buildings. Her eyes watched Kyung-ho with interest and perhaps a little fear. Your Majesty, Kyung-ho began, we are going to start with basic movements. Nothing dramatic, just getting your body used to the idea of exercise again. I have not exercised in 15 years, she admitted. My advisors said it was beneath the dignity of an empress. Your advisors were wrong. Even emperors need to stay healthy if they want to keep their empires. The first exercise was simple. Kyung-ho asked her to lift her arms above her head and then lower them slowly. For most people, this would be trivial. For someone who weighed for tons and had not moved in years, it was exhausting. After just 5 repetitions, the Empress was breathing heavily. Sweat beaded on her thick skin, and her arms shook with effort. But she did not stop. There was determination in her eyes that reminded Kung Ho why she had been able to rule an empire for so long. "Good," he said. "Now we try leg movements." This was harder. The Empress's legs had grown weak from supporting her enormous weight without moving. Even simple exercises like lifting her knees made her grunt with effort. But she kept trying, and Kung Ho could see small improvements even in the first session. "Enough for today," he said after 30 minutes.
Tomorrow?
"We will do a little more." The Empress nodded, too tired to speak. As they left her chambers, Kung Ho felt both hopeful and worried. She had the willpower to improve. The physical challenges were enormous. Over the next few days, word of the training sessions spread through the palace. Court officials began gathering outside the Empress's chambers, trying to listen to what was happening inside. Some seemed curious, others appeared concerned, and a few looked openly hostile. "They think you are weakening her," Sungmin Park explained during one of their brief meetings. In Valdarian culture, showing physical struggle is seen as a sign of weakness. Some of the nobles are starting to whisper that maybe it is time for a new ruler. This worried Kung Ho more than he wanted to admit. If the Empress's enemies moved against her while she was in the middle of training, they would all be killed. But there was nothing to do except continue working and hope they could show results quickly enough to silence the critics. The biggest challenge came from Prince Caxmore, the Empress's nephew, and the most likely candidate to replace her. He was a traditional Valdarian male, tall and powerful, with scars from many battles. He had been quietly building support among the military leaders for months. One morning, Prince Caxmore appeared at the training session uninvited. He stood in the doorway, watching as the Empress struggled through her exercises. His expression was not friendly. "Aunt," he said in a voice that carried clearly across the room, "the people are concerned about your health. Perhaps it would be better to rest instead of exhausting yourself with these strange human rituals." The Empress stopped exercising and looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed much more dangerous. "Nephew, I am touched by your concern, but I feel stronger than I have in years." "You look tired," Prince Caxmore replied. "Tired and weak. The Empire needs strong leadership, not someone who struggles to lift her own arms." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Court officials shifted nervously, unsure of what to do. Kung Ho realized this was about much more than exercise. This was a direct challenge to the Empress's authority. "Perhaps," the Empress said slowly, "you would like to join me in these exercises, to show the court how easy they are?" Prince Caxmore smiled confidently. "Of course, Aunt. I would be honored." Kung Ho quickly designed a modified version of the Empress's routine, adjusted for Prince Caxmore's smaller size and better physical condition. The exercises were still challenging, but definitely achievable for someone in good shape. The prince started confidently, but within minutes he was sweating heavily. The movements that looked simple were actually quite difficult, requiring precise control and sustained effort. By the end of the session, he was exhausted and clearly struggling. "These human methods are more challenging than they appear," he admitted, breathing hard. The Empress smiled for the first time in days. "Yes, they are, but they work. I can already feel the difference." As Prince Caxmore left the chamber, Kung Ho noticed the hostile looks from several court officials. They had hoped to see the Empress humiliated, but instead they had watched their prince struggle with the same exercises she was mastering. "You made an enemy today?" Haijin whispered to him. "We already had enemies," Kung Ho replied. "Now at least they know we are not as weak as they thought." That evening, Dongwu finished building his first piece of specialized equipment. It was a support harness that could help the Empress maintain her balance during more complex exercises. The engineering was brilliant, using advanced materials to create something that was both strong enough to support her weight and flexible enough to allow natural movement. "This will let her try standing exercises without risking a fall," he explained. "If she falls at her weight, she could be seriously injured." The harness worked perfectly. For the first time in months, the Empress was able to stand and move around her chambers without assistance. The joy on her face was unmistakable. "I had forgotten what it felt like to stand on my own," she said, tears running down her cheeks. Thank you, human engineer. Thank you all. But their success was creating new problems. Several assassination attempts were made against the human trainers over the following weeks. Poisoned food, sabotaged equipment, and even a direct attack by masked figures in the palace corridors. Each time, they were saved by the Empress's personal guards, who had been ordered to protect them at all costs. Someone really wants us dead, Hyjin observed after the third attempt. Let them try, Kyung-ho replied. We have work to do. The Empress was making real progress. She had lost almost 200 pounds and could now move around her chambers freely. Her energy levels were higher, and her appetite was under control for the first time in years. More importantly, her confidence was returning, but they were running out of time. The solar cycle was more than half over, and the political situation was getting more dangerous every day. Prince Caxmore was openly questioning the Empress's fitness to rule, and several military commanders were beginning to listen to him. We need to do something dramatic, Kyung-ho told his team. Something that will show the entire empire that she is getting stronger, not weaker. What did you have in mind? Dongwu asked. Kyung-ho smiled grimly. It is time to teach an empress how to fight. Training the empress to fight was unlike anything Kyung-ho had ever attempted. Her species had natural weapons that humans lacked. Sharp claws, thick armor-like skin, and incredible strength when properly used. But years of sitting still had made her forget how to use these advantages. Your people are warriors by nature, Kyung-ho explained during their morning session. But war is not just about being big or strong. It is about being smart, fast, and ready. The Empress practiced basic combat moves that seemed almost too simple. How to shift her weight quickly. How to use her arms to block attacks. How to turn her massive size from a weakness into a weapon. Each movement had to be modified for her unique body, but the principles remained the same. In human martial arts, we say that the best fighter is not the one who never gets hit, Kyung-ho said. It is the one who can take a hit and keep fighting. Have not been hit by anything in 20 years, the Empress admitted. My guards make sure of that. Then you have forgotten one of the most important lessons of leadership. Sometimes you must take damage to win the bigger battle. While Kyung-ho worked on combat training, his team faced their own challenges. Hyjin discovered that the palace kitchen staff were secretly adding extra fats and sugars to the Empress's carefully planned meals. They claimed it was to make the food taste better, but Hyjin suspected sabotage. Someone is paying them too. Undermine our work, she told Kyung-ho. Every meal I design gets changed before it reaches the Empress. Can you prove it? Not yet, but I am working on it. Dongwu had his own problems. His exercise equipment kept breaking in suspicious ways. Support cables would snap just as the Empress was using them. Electronic systems would fail at critical moments. Each failure could have seriously injured her if he had not built multiple safety systems. They are trying to make it look like accidents, he explained. But the failure patterns are too consistent to be random. The political situation was getting worse every day. Prince Caxmore had begun holding private meetings with military commanders, supposedly to discuss border defense, but actually to question the Empress's leadership. Word of these meetings reached the Empress through her spy network, and she was not pleased. My nephew thinks I am too weak to notice his little games, she said during one training session. He will learn otherwise. Your Majesty, Kyung-ho said carefully. What will you do? What I should have done months ago. I will challenge him to ritual combat. Kyung-ho felt his heart skip a beat. Ritual combat was a Valdarian tradition where leadership disputes were settled through single combat. The winner took control, and the loser was usually killed or exiled. It was exactly the kind of physical challenge that the old Empress would have avoided. Are you sure that is wise? He asked. The Empress smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, it was not a kind smile. I have been preparing for this. Moments since our training began, Prince Caxmore is strong, but he is also overconfident. He thinks he knows what to expect from his fat old aunt. When? Tomorrow. The announcement will be made at the evening meal. By law, he cannot refuse. That night Kyung-ho barely slept. He went over every combat technique they had practiced, every strength the Empress had developed, every weakness she still needed to overcome. The ritual combat would be fought in the great arena before thousands of witnesses. If she lost, they would all die with her. The next morning brought terrible news. Hai-Jin had been poisoned during the night. She was alive but very sick, barely able to stand. Dongwu had been attacked by masked figures and was recovering from a broken arm. Both incidents happened just hours before the combat was scheduled to begin. They are trying to remove your support team, Sungmin Park explained when he brought the news. Without your nutritionist and engineer, they think you will make mistakes. But Kyung-ho was already adapting. It spent years training soldiers. To fight without perfect conditions, the Empress would have to do the same. Your Majesty, he said. When they met for final preparations, your team is injured, your enemies are confident, and everyone expects you to lose. This is exactly the kind of situation where humans do our best work. And what do humans do in situations like this? We prove that everyone else was wrong. The great arena was packed with spectators from across the empire. Nobles, military officers, common citizens, and representatives from other worlds had all come to witness what many believed would be the end of Empress Naravel's reign. The arena itself was enormous. With a fighting area the size of several football fields, Prince Caxmore entered first. Wearing traditional combat armor and carrying weapons that had been in his family for generations, he moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Acknowledging the cheers of his supporters with raised arms, the Empress entered from the opposite side, and the crowd fell silent. She had lost almost 300 pounds since the training began, and her transformation was obvious to everyone. She moved with purpose and strength that had been missing for years. But she was still much larger than her nephew, and many in the crowd wondered if size would be enough. Citizens of the Empire, the Empress called out, her voice carrying clearly across the arena. Today we settle the question of leadership through the ancient traditions of our people. Let the strongest rule. The combat began with both fighters circling each other carefully. Prince Caxmore was faster and more experienced, but the Empress had advantages he had not expected. Her training had taught her to use her size effectively, turning her bulk into a weapon rather than a handicap. The first exchange was brief but telling. Prince Caxmore attacked with traditional techniques, expecting to overwhelm his opponent quickly. But the Empress had learned to defend herself using methods he had never seen before. She absorbed his attacks and countered with moves that combined human martial arts with Faldarian natural weapons. She is fighting like a human, someone in the crowd whispered. Where did she learn such things? The battle continued for almost an hour. Prince Caxmore was skilled, but he was also predictable. He fought the same way Faldarian warriors had always fought, relying on strength and aggression. The Empress fought with strategy and patience, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came when Prince Caxmore overextended himself during a particularly ambitious attack. The Empress caught his arm, used his own momentum against him, and threw him across the arena with a technique that Kun-ho had taught her just days before. Prince Caxmore hit the ground hard and did not get up immediately. When he finally struggled to his feet, everyone could see that he was badly injured. The Empress approached him slowly, giving him time to surrender with honor. Uncle, he gasped, I yield. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Empress had not just won the combat, she had dominated it. The transformation was complete. Everyone could see that their ruler was stronger than ever. But as Kun-ho watched from the sidelines, he realized that their success might have created a new problem. The Empress was no longer the weak, helpless ruler who had needed their help. She was once again the powerful, confident leader of a vast military empire. And empires, by their nature, were always looking for new worlds to conquer. The victory in the arena changed everything. News of the Empress's triumph spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, messages were arriving from every corner of the Valdarian Empire. Governors who had been preparing to rebel suddenly pledged renewed loyalty. Military commanders who had been considering independence rushed to reaffirm their allegiance. Your Majesty, Advisor Thexmar reported during the morning briefing. 17 border worlds that had declared independence last month are now requesting to rejoin the Empire. They claim it was all a misunderstanding. Empress Naravel, now, calling herself Naravel the Renewed, smiled with satisfaction. She had lost almost 400 pounds total, and could move with an agility that amazed everyone who remembered her previous condition. More importantly, her victory had restored the fear and respect that held the Empire together. "Of course they want to return," she said. "They gambled that I was too weak to stop them. They were wrong." But the Empress's transformation went deeper than just physical fitness. The months of training had changed how she thought about leadership itself. She had learned that true strength came not from size or fear, but from discipline, preparation, and the willingness to constantly improve. "I've been thinking about expansion," she told Kyung-ho during one of their private meetings. "Are systems near human space that would make valuable additions to the Empire." This was exactly what Kyung-ho had been afraid of. "Your Majesty, with respect, perhaps it would be better to focus on strengthening what you already have, rather than conquering new territory." "You sound like a diplomat," the Empress replied, but she was smiling. "Tell me, human trainer, what do you think makes a good leader?" "Someone who makes their people stronger, not someone who simply collects more people to rule." It was a bold thing to say, but the Empress seemed to consider it seriously. Over the following weeks, she began implementing changes that surprised everyone. Instead of planning new conquests, she focused on improving conditions within the existing empire. Trade routes were made more efficient, communication systems were upgraded, and corrupt officials were removed from power. "She is not acting like a traditional Valdarian ruler," Sungmin Park observed. Usually after a victory like this, they would immediately start planning their next war. "Maybe that is why the Empire has been having problems," Kyun-ho replied. "Maybe they need a different kind of leader." The other human team members were also seeing changes. Ajin had recovered from her poisoning and was now training Valdarian cooks throughout the palace. Her nutritional programs were being implemented across the Empire, improving the health of millions of citizens. Dongwu had been promoted to chief engineer and was designing new technologies that made life easier for people on distant worlds, but success brought new challenges. Human fitness methods were suddenly in high demand throughout the galaxy. Alien races that had never shown interest in Earth were now sending diplomatic missions, specifically to learn about human training techniques. The small human presence in the galaxy was growing rapidly. "We are becoming famous," Haijin said during one of their weekly meetings. "Every day I receive requests from alien governments wanting to hire human nutritionists." "Same here," Dongwu added. "Apparently human engineering approaches are considered innovative and efficient. I have job offers from 12 different star systems." This put Kyung-ho in an interesting position. He had completed his original mission. The Empress was healthy, strong, and firmly in control of her empire. By all rights, he should be free to return to Earth, but the Empress had other plans. "I have a proposal for you," she said, during what was supposed to be their final training session. "Stay here as my personal advisor. Help me continue to transform this empire using human principles." "Your Majesty, I am honored, but I am not a politician. I am a fitness trainer. You're more than that, and you know it. You have shown me that strength comes from discipline and continuous improvement. These are lessons that every leader needs to learn." Kyung-ho looked around the training room, where they had spent so many hours working together. The Empress was right. He had learned as much from her as she had from him. Leading an empire required the same qualities as training soldiers: patience, determination, and the ability to see potential where others saw only problems. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. "I want to establish human advisory positions throughout the empire. It's not just for fitness and nutrition, but for education, engineering, and administration. Humans have a unique perspective that could benefit everyone." It was an ambitious idea, but Kyung-ho could see the potential. The Valdarian Empire had the resources and infrastructure to implement changes on a massive scale. If they could introduce human concepts of continuous improvement in individual development, it might create a more stable and prosperous civilization. "I would need to bring in more humans," he said. "Specialists in different fields." "Already arranged. I have been in contact with Earth's government. They are very interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations." This was news to Kyun-ho. "They know about what happened here, of course? Did you think your disappearance went unnoticed? Your success has made humanity much more interesting to the rest of the galaxy." Over the following months, The first human advisory missions began arriving at the Imperial Palace. Teachers, engineers, doctors, and administrators came to work alongside their Valdarian counterparts. The cultural exchange was fascinating to watch, as both species learned from each other. But the most important change was in the Empress herself. She had not just lost weight and gained strength. She had learned to value growth over conquest, improvement over domination. The empire that had once been held together by fear was slowly becoming something based on mutual benefit and shared progress. "You have given me something I never expected," she told Kyung-ho during one of their evening walks through the palace gardens. "You have shown me that a leader's job is not to be the strongest person in the room, but to make everyone else stronger. You learn that yourself, Your Majesty. I just provided the training program, perhaps. But without your stubborn human insistence that I could change, I would still be sitting on my throne, slowly dying and watching my empire crumble." As they walked, Kyun-cho thought about how much had changed since his capture on Mars. He had come here as a prisoner, expecting to die. Instead, he had helped transform one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. More importantly, he had learned that the principles that worked for training soldiers also worked for changing civilizations. "Your Majesty," he said, I will accept your offer, but I have one condition." "What is that?" "We continue the training sessions. Leadership is like fitness. If you stop working at it, you start losing it." The Empress laughed, a sound that was becoming much more common in the palace. "Agreed. But I warn you, I am much stronger now than when we started. These sessions might actually be challenging for you." "I am counting on it," Kyun-ho replied. After all, the best way to stay sharp is to keep facing impossible challenges. As they continued their walk, neither of them noticed the small group of observers watching from the shadows. Representatives from other alien governments had been monitoring the changes in the Valdarian Empire with great interest. The transformation of Empress Naravel had not gone unnoticed, and several other rulers were beginning to wonder if they might benefit from human advisory services as well. The success of one impossible training program was about to change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. 6 months after the ritual combat, Kyun-ho stood in the same throne room where he had first met Empress Naravel. But everything had changed. The massive throne had been replaced with a smaller, more practical chair that allowed the Empress to move freely during court sessions. The intimidating distance between ruler and subjects had been reduced, creating a more open atmosphere. "You have been here almost a year," the Empress said, gesturing for him to sit in one of the comfortable chairs that had been placed near her throne. "Do you miss your home?" Kyun-cho considered the question carefully. He did miss Earth and Mars, and the simple life of training soldiers. But he had discovered something here that he had never expected to find. He had learned that the same principles that made good soldiers could also make good civilizations. "I miss some things," he admitted, "but I have found something here that I never had on Earth. I have found a purpose that affects millions of lives instead of just a few dozen soldiers." The Empress nodded thoughtfully. Over the months, she had changed in ways that went far beyond physical fitness. She had become more thoughtful, more patient, and more interested in long-term solutions than quick victories. The Empire was stronger because of it. "I have been thinking about gratitude," she said. "It is not an emotion that comes naturally to rulers. We are taught to expect loyalty, to demand obedience, to take what we need. But you have shown me something different." "What is that, Your Majesty?" "You have shown me that the best leaders are grateful for the opportunity to serve their people rather than expecting their people to be grateful for their leadership." This was a profound change from the ruler who had first threatened to execute him if he failed. The Empress had learned that true power came not from forcing others to submit, but from inspiring them to be better than they thought possible. "Want to offer you something?" she continued. "Not as payment for services rendered, but as recognition of what you have accomplished here." She gestured to Advisor Thexmer, who approached carrying a small but ornate box. Inside was a medallion, made of metal that seemed to shift colors in the light. The craftsmanship was incredible, but what caught Kyung-ho's attention was the symbol engraved on it. It showed a human figure and a Valdarian figure standing together, with stars surrounding them. This is the order of mutual advancement, the Empress explained. I created it specifically to honor those who help others grow stronger. You are the first recipient, but you will not be the last. Kung Ho accepted the medallion with genuine surprise. In all his years of training soldiers, he had received many commendations and awards, but this felt different. Not just for his success, but for the principles he had tried to live by. Thank you, Your Majesty. This means more than you know. There is more, she said. I want to formalize the Human Advisory Program, not just here in the palace, but throughout the Empire. I want to establish training centers on 100 worlds, staffed by humans who can teach our people the methods that transformed me. The scope of what she was proposing was staggering. It would require thousands of human specialists, massive resources, and cooperation between two species that had barely known each other a year ago. But Kyung Ho could see the potential. What would my role be in this program? Whatever you choose it to be. You could return to Earth as a hero and enjoy the fame that comes with transforming an alien empire. You could stay here and help me implement these changes personally, or you could do something else entirely. Kyung Ho walked to the window and looked out at the vast city below. In the distance, he could see construction crews working on new buildings designed with human architectural principles. The integration of two very different cultures was already beginning. I have a different idea, he said finally. We created an exchange program. Humans come here to teach and learn, but Valdarians also go to human worlds to share their knowledge. True cooperation, not just one-way instruction. The Empress smiled broadly. I was hoping you would suggest something like that. I have already been in contact with several human governments. They are very interested in Valdarian engineering and medical technology. And what about the other alien races? The ones who have been watching what happened here? Ah, you noticed them too. Yes, we have received inquiries from 17 different governments. Everyone wants to know how we achieved such dramatic improvements in such a short time. This was the moment Kyung Ho had been building toward without realizing it. The success of one impossible training program had created opportunities that could reshape the entire galaxy. But it would require careful planning and genuine commitment from everyone involved. Your Majesty, he said, I think we have a chance to do something that has never been done before. We can create a network of cooperation that spans multiple species and star systems. Not an empire built on conquest, but a community built on mutual improvement. And you would be willing to help coordinate such an effort. I would be honored to try. The Empress stood and walked to join him at the window. In the months since their first meeting, she had become more than just a successful student. She had become a friend and a partner in creating something larger than either of them could have imagined. You know, she said, when I first ordered your capture, I thought I was hiring a trainer to help me lose weight. I never expected to gain a vision for the future. I never expected to find my life's work in the throne room of an alien empire. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city below. In the distance, ships were arriving and departing from the spaceport, carrying people and ideas between worlds that had never communicated before. The transformation that had begun with simple exercises was becoming something much larger. A year later, Kyung Ho stood in a similar window. But this time, he was on Earth. The Interspecies Cooperation Center had been built in Geneva, and he served as its first director. Representatives from 12 different alien races worked alongside humans to share knowledge and solve problems that no single species could handle alone. Haijin had become the head of the Galactic Nutrition Council, helping to improve health across dozens of worlds. Dongwu was designing spacecraft that incorporated the best engineering principles from 5 different species. Even Sungmin Park had found new purpose as the first human ambassador to the Valdarian Empire. Sir, his assistant called from the door. Empress Naravel is here for your weekly training session. Kyung Ho smiled. Even with all her new responsibilities, the Empress had insisted on continuing their regular workouts. She claimed it helped her think more clearly, but he suspected she simply enjoyed the challenge of staying in shape. Tell her I will be right there, he said. Remind her that we are working on advanced combat techniques today. She should be prepared to sweat. As he left his office, Kyung Ho reflected on how much had changed since that morning on Mars. When alien ships had first appeared in the sky, He had been captured as a prisoner, worked as a trainer, and had somehow become the architect of a new kind of civilization. The most surprising part was not that he had helped transform an alien, Empress. It was that she had been so genuinely grateful for the opportunity to change. In a galaxy full of beings who thought strength meant never admitting weakness, she had discovered that true leadership meant never stopping the effort to become better, and that, Kung Ho thought as he headed to the training room, was the most human lesson of all.